My name is Michael, and I once believed that my life was a carefully arranged tapestry of love, trust, and stability. I was married to Emily, an intelligent, charming woman whose smile once lit up every corner of our home. My mother, Margaret, had played a significant role in shaping my early life. Her gentle guidance and unwavering support were constants that I cherished. But as the years passed, subtle fissures began to form in our family dynamic, fissures that would eventually lead to a betrayal so profound that my world would be irreparably altered. From the very beginning of our marriage, there was an undercurrent of tension between Emily and my mother. Emily would often complain about the constant interference and unsolicited advice that Margaret offered, painting my mother as an overbearing presence in our household. I tried to mediate, assuring Emily that my mother's actions came from a place of love, but her resentment seemed to deepen with every passing day. I remember one evening during a family dinner when Emily's tone turned icy as she said, "I need space, Michael. I need space from her constant judgment." I had brushed off the comment then, believing it to be the exaggerated musings of a stressed wife, unaware that it was a harbinger of darker days. The tension was palpable, and soon I began noticing subtle changes in Emily's behavior. She became increasingly distant, her warm eyes clouding over with hidden emotions. Late at night, I would find her awake in our quiet home, her gaze fixed on the dark corners of our bedroom, as if she were waiting for something or someone to appear. I dismissed these moments as mere manifestations of anxiety or exhaustion, but deep down, a nagging feeling told me that something was amiss. At the same time, my mother maintained a steady presence in our lives, her smile unwavering even when the atmosphere at home grew heavy. Yet, behind her kind eyes, I sometimes caught fleeting glances of something I couldn't quite define, a secret sadness, perhaps, or a longing that she refused to acknowledge openly. Family gatherings, which once were sources of comfort, now carried an undercurrent of tension. The air would be charged with unspoken words and half-hidden resentments. I tried to focus on the good memories, Emily's laughter, my mother's comforting words, and the sense of unity that had once bound us together. But every time I attempted to recapture that warmth, I was confronted by the reality of strained interactions and barely concealed hostility. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at work, I arrived home to find the house unusually quiet. The silence itself was unsettling, a stark contrast to the lively conversations that typically filled our evenings. As I made my way to the living room, I noticed Emily sitting alone on the couch, her expression unreadable. I sat beside her, attempting to bridge the widening gap between us. "How was your day?" I asked, hoping to spark a dialogue that might dissipate the growing chill in our relationship. Emily's eyes briefly flickered with sadness before she offered a curt, "Fine." The brevity of her reply stung more than I expected, and for a moment, I felt the overwhelming weight of isolation. As days turned into weeks, the subtle cracks in our family began to widen into glaring chasms. I found myself caught between two women I loved dearly, my wife, who was slowly retreating into a shell of discontent, and my mother, whose presence was both comforting and, increasingly, enigmatic. I started noticing small things, the way Emily would tense up whenever my mother entered the room, the furtive glances exchanged when I thought I wasn't looking, and whispered conversations that ceased as soon as I approached. I tried to dismiss these incidents as misinterpretations, desperate attempts by my mind to impose order on an increasingly chaotic emotional landscape. Despite the growing unease, I clung to hope. I believed that if I could just talk to Emily openly about the mounting tension, we might be able to rebuild the trust that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I invited her for a walk in the park, a place we once frequented to share dreams and confide in one another. The drizzle was soft, almost therapeutic, as we strolled along the winding paths beneath the ancient oak trees. I gathered the courage to broach the subject. "Emily, I feel like something is off between us. I can't shake the feeling that there are secrets hidden in the silence. Please, talk to me." Her eyes met mine with a storm of emotions, guilt, sorrow, and something else that I couldn't yet decipher. "Michael," she began hesitantly, "there are things that I'm not sure I can ever explain." I pressed gently, wanting to give her space to open up, but she merely sighed and changed the subject, leaving me with a lingering sense of dread. The more I probed, the deeper the silence grew. I could no longer ignore the notion that the tension between Emily and my mother was far from trivial. Unbeknownst to me, a clandestine alliance was forming behind my back, a secret that would shatter the foundation of everything I believed in. Every night, as I lay in bed, my mind was a battlefield of conflicting emotions, love for the two most important women in my life, confusion over the mounting hostilities. and an ever-growing fear that something irreparable was brewing in the shadows of our home. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed me, I found myself replaying every word, every glance, every sigh of that rainy afternoon. The park, once a haven of shared dreams, had become a silent witness to my unraveling reality. I realized with a heavy heart that I was standing on the precipice of betrayal, a betrayal that I could neither predict nor fully understand. And as the night deepened, I braced myself for the storm that was coming, unaware that the seeds of treachery had already been sown in the fertile ground of our fractured trust. Thus began the slow, inexorable descent into a betrayal that would alter the course of my life forever, a betrayal that, unbeknownst to me, was being orchestrated by the two women I loved and trusted. The quiet before the storm was over, and as the first drops of rain turned into a torrential downpour, I sensed that nothing would ever be the same again. In the weeks following that fateful walk in the park, the tension at home escalated into something darker, something I struggled desperately to ignore. I found myself growing increasingly isolated within my own home, a silent observer to a drama that I could neither fully grasp nor control. It began with hushed conversations that ceased as soon as I entered the room. I would overhear snatches of dialogue, words laden with secret meanings, between Emily and my mother. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a text message on Emily's phone, one that hinted at a clandestine meeting, that the dread in my chest became too overwhelming to dismiss. I remember the exact moment I discovered the message. I had returned home early from work one evening, and in a moment of weakness, I decided to check on Emily, expecting to find her in the kitchen preparing dinner. Instead, I found her in the study, her eyes fixed on her phone with a mixture of anxiety and determination. The screen glowed softly in the dim light, displaying a conversation with someone named M. My heart raced as I scrolled through the messages, cryptic notes that spoke of secret meetings, whispered apologies, and shared regrets. Each word felt like a dagger twisting in my heart. The revelation was unmistakable. My wife, the woman I had once trusted implicitly, was hiding something with my own mother. I confronted Emily later that night, the text messages burning in my memory like a brand. I recalled the trembling in my voice as I asked, "Emily, who is M? And why have you been hiding these messages from me?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of fear before she masked it with a veneer of defiance. "Michael, I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, but her words rang hollow in the quiet of our room. I pressed on, recounting every detail of the conversation I had seen. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was as if every word I uttered was met with an impenetrable wall of denial. Over the following days, the tension in our home grew thicker, laden with unspoken accusations and a palpable sense of betrayal. I began to notice that my mother, Margaret, who had always been a steady presence, seemed to be spending an unusual amount of time with Emily. Their meetings, once innocuous and filled with small talk about family recipes or trivial household matters, now carried an undercurrent of urgency. I found myself wondering if the two had conspired together, their mutual resentment and hidden agendas intertwining in ways I could never have imagined. Late one evening, as the house lay silent under the weight of its secrets, I decided to follow a hunch. I left the house for a brief walk, but made a mental note to observe the comings and goings when I returned. The next day, I carefully watched as my mother and Emily slipped out of the house together, their expressions masked in a way that suggested more than mere familial affection. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Was it an affair? A secret alliance? Or was it something even darker, a betrayal so deep that it threatened to consume all that I had once held dear? I spent sleepless nights wrestling with the evidence and my own doubts. The texts, the furtive glances, the hushed conversations, they all painted a picture of a betrayal that I could neither understand nor accept. As a husband, I had believed in the sanctity of our union, in the vows we had exchanged in front of our family and friends. Now, those vows felt like brittle promises shattered by a relentless force from within my own home. I questioned everything, my judgment, my memory, even my own role in the unraveling of our lives. Had I failed to see the warning signs? Was I, in some way, responsible for the growing chasm between Emily and my mother? One particularly heavy night, as I sat alone in the darkness of our living room, I found myself caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, anger, despair, and a deep-seated sadness that seemed to seep into my very bones. I tried to rationalize the situation, telling myself that misunderstandings could be resolved with honest conversation. But deep down, I knew that the betrayal was real, its roots entwined in secrets that ran deeper than any superficial misunderstanding. I reached out to my mother one afternoon, hoping to salvage some semblance of clarity. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked tentatively. Her eyes, so full of warmth and care in the past, now held an inscrutable depth. Of course, Michael, she replied softly, though I sensed an underlying tension in her tone. I tried to broach the subject of the recent changes in our home, but every time I mentioned the word betrayal, her eyes would flicker with a mixture of regret and defiance, and the conversation would end abruptly. It was as if she were guarding a secret that I was not meant to uncover, a secret that, once revealed, would irrevocably alter the fabric of our lives. That night, as I lay awake, haunted by the whispers in the shadows and the echoes of a family in turmoil, I felt the cold grip of betrayal tighten around my heart. I realized that the truth was no longer something I could ignore or postpone. It was time to face the storm head-on, even if it meant confronting the two people I loved most in the world. The tension that had been simmering for weeks finally erupted one chilly evening when I could no longer ignore the signs. I had just returned home from work when I heard raised voices in the kitchen. My heart pounded as I cautiously approached the doorway, straining to catch fragments of the conversation. What I heard chilled me to the core. My wife, Emily, and my mother, Margaret, speaking in urgent, hushed tones that betrayed a secret too painful to confront. Every word was laced with emotion, a mix of desperation, regret, and a strange, forbidden tenderness. I couldn't bear it any longer. I stepped into the room, my voice trembling as I demanded, "What is going on here?" The room fell silent, and for a few agonizing moments, the world seemed to hold its breath. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked down, while my mother's expression was a storm of conflicting emotions: guilt, sorrow, and something I couldn't quite decipher. The silence was shattered when Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, I'm so sorry." My mind raced as I tried to understand the incomprehensible. How could the two women I trusted so implicitly betray me in such a profound manner? I demanded answers, and in that raw, painful moment, the truth spilled out. My mother admitted that she had allowed herself to be drawn into a relationship with Emily, a relationship that had begun as a means of seeking solace from feelings of neglect and isolation, but had evolved into something far more complicated and, in many ways, destructive. Emily, her voice choked with remorse, explained that she had been caught in a web of emotional manipulation and loneliness, feelings that had grown over the years under the weight of my mother's constant intrusion into our lives. I listened, numb and horrified, as the two women recounted how they had found comfort in one another's arms. They spoke of long, sleepless nights filled with confessions of pain and the desperate search for affection in a place where they thought none could be found. In that moment, the betrayal was not merely an act of infidelity, it was a profound fracture in the foundation of our family, a breach of trust so deep that it left me questioning everything I had once held dear. Anger surged through me, mingling with the grief and despair that threatened to overwhelm my senses. I shouted, "How could you do this to me? To our family?" My voice echoed in the cold, sterile silence of the room, a stark reminder of the betrayal that now lay bare before me. Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she tried to explain, "Michael, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lonely, and I felt neglected. I know that's no excuse." Emily's tears cascaded down her cheeks as she pleaded, "I thought I could fix everything, that this would bring us closer, but I was wrong." Their words, though spoken in sorrow and regret, cut deeper than any physical wound. I felt as if I were standing on the edge of a precipice, with the abyss of betrayal yawning beneath me. Every memory, every shared laugh, every tender moment, was now tainted by the realization that those moments had been built on a lie. In the midst of my pain, I could only wonder how I had been so blind, how the subtle signals had compounded into an irreversible act of betrayal. The confrontation became a vortex of raw emotion. In a desperate bid for understanding, I demanded to know if there had ever been a time when they had considered stopping, when they had thought of the consequences of their actions. Both women, now fraught with anguish, admitted that the affair had spiraled beyond their control, an unexpected collision of vulnerabilities and unspoken desires. They spoke of how my mother's constant need for validation and Emily's deep-seated feelings of isolation had intertwined, leading them down a path that neither had anticipated. In that moment of confrontation, I felt an overwhelming surge of conflicting emotions. I was angry at the betrayal, heartbroken at the destruction of our family unit, and yet, a part of me still desperately clung to the hope that I might somehow salvage what remained of the relationships I once treasured. The raw vulnerability in Emily's voice, the tearful regret in my mother's eyes, each detail etched itself into my memory, a permanent reminder of a love that had gone disastrously astray. As the confrontation unfolded, the room became a battleground of shattered trust and unspoken sorrows. I could see the internal struggle in both Emily and Margaret, the guilt and regret evident in every trembling word. Yet, in that dark, tumultuous moment, I realized that nothing could undo what had been done. The truth, in all its painful clarity, stood before me, a truth that demanded acceptance, however bitter it might be. When the confrontation finally subsided, an uneasy silence settled over us, a silence laden with the weight of irreversible choices and irrevocable losses. I retreated to a corner of the room, trying desperately to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal that had unfolded. The world as I had known it had crumbled in mere moments, leaving behind nothing but fragments of a once unbreakable trust. In the days and weeks that followed the confrontation, our home transformed into a landscape of sorrow and regret. I tried to navigate the ruins of a relationship that had once been my anchor, but each step felt like wading through a mire of guilt and shattered dreams. I spent countless hours alone in the study, poring over memories of happier times, questioning where the love had gone, and where the betrayal had taken root. The aftermath was not one of immediate anger or violence, but of a slow, grinding sorrow that seeped into every aspect of our daily lives. I attempted to salvage a semblance of normalcy, clinging to routines and responsibilities as if they could somehow stitch together the fabric of a broken family. Yet, every shared meal, every awkward silence, was a stark reminder of the irrevocable damage done. Emily and my mother both withdrew into their own worlds of remorse, each haunted by the ghost of what we had lost. Their attempts to reconcile their feelings only deepened the chasm between us, and I soon realized that forgiveness, if it were even possible, would be a long, arduous journey. In an effort to understand how we had arrived at this point, I sought counseling. I wanted to believe that there was hope, a way to heal, to rebuild. I began speaking to a therapist, hoping that the process of untangling our emotions might shed some light on the dark corners of our past. I learned that sometimes betrayal is not a single moment of treachery, but rather a gradual erosion of trust that builds up unnoticed until it reaches a critical point. The sessions were painful, each revelation a reminder of the love that had been twisted into something unrecognizable. I listened as my therapist explained that sometimes the roots of betrayal run deep, entangled in unmet needs, unspoken resentments, and the desperate longing for connection. During one particularly revealing session, I was encouraged to write down my feelings, to confront the betrayal on paper so that I might understand the full extent of my own pain. As I scribbled down my thoughts, I came face to face with the bitter truth. The betrayal was not solely the fault of Emily or my mother. In some small, devastating way, I had played a part in nurturing an environment where secrets and resentment could thrive. The realization was a hard pill to swallow, but it marked the beginning of my journey towards acceptance. Over time, I found that the days slowly bled into one another, a monotonous rhythm of grief and fleeting moments of clarity. I attempted to re-establish contact with Emily, to find out if the woman I had married still resided somewhere beneath the layers of sorrow and guilt. Our conversations were halting at first, tentative acknowledgments of each other's pain. Yet, with each passing day, I began to see small signs of remorse and a desire for healing in her eyes. She admitted that she had felt isolated, overwhelmed by the constant pressure from my mother, and that in her vulnerability, she had made choices that she now deeply regretted. My mother, too, expressed a profound sorrow for her role in the betrayal. In quiet moments of introspection, she confided that she had longed for the unconditional love that she felt was slipping away from her as she grew older, an affection that she sought in places where it never truly belonged. I realized that both women had been searching for solace in each other, misguidedly believing that their union might fill the voids in their hearts. This understanding, however painful, allowed me to begin forgiving them, not for their actions, but for the deep-seated loneliness that had led them astray. As the weeks turned into months, our family was forced to redefine itself. I made the difficult decision to separate from Emily, acknowledging that the betrayal had irrevocably altered the dynamics of our relationship. The separation was not a moment of triumph or vindication, but rather a somber acknowledgement that sometimes love is not enough to heal every wound. I moved into a small apartment, a space where I could rebuild my life piece by piece, free from the constant reminder of the betrayal that had once consumed my every thought. In the quiet solitude of my new home, I began to reflect on the lessons that the ordeal had taught me. I realized that trust, once broken, leaves scars that time can only dim but never fully erase. I understood that the path to healing is neither linear nor easy. It is a journey marked by setbacks and small victories. I began to write, pouring my heart onto paper as a means of coming to terms with my pain and my loss. The act of writing became both a catharsis and a tribute to the complexity of human relationships, a reminder that even in the depths of betrayal, there is a capacity for forgiveness and renewal. Though the betrayal had shattered the family I once knew, it also forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities and the ways in which love can become entangled with pain. I learned that healing requires acceptance of the past, of our imperfections, and of the fact that some wounds may never completely close. Over time, I found a measure of peace in the realization that the future, though uncertain, held the promise of growth and self-discovery. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a new chapter in my life, I carry with me the bittersweet memories of a love lost and a trust betrayed. The scars remain, silent testaments to a time when the bonds of family were irreparably broken. Yet, within those scars lies the quiet resilience of the human spirit, a determination to move forward, even when the weight of betrayal seems unbearable. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, and the arduous road to healing. Though the events that transpired will forever haunt me, they have also taught me the importance of facing the truth, no matter how painful, and embracing the possibility of renewal in the aftermath of devastation.